Israel just shocked the world with what it is building. It now has a laser that can slice open a guided rocket or drone in the sky in seconds without firing a missile, and each shot costs less than a takeaway coffee. In the same shield, another interceptor reaches into space to hit warheads before they fall back toward any city. Together, they promise to stop swarms of drones, cruise missiles, and long-range ballistic missiles that other countries spend fortunes trying to block. So what happens when a country can erase a million-dollar missile with a pulse of light and then export that kind of protection? On one night in April 2024, Iran and allied groups launched more than 300 drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles toward Israel. Sirens sounded from the Golan Heights in the north down to the Red Sea as air defense crews watched screens fill with tracks and counted down interception windows in single-digit seconds. By morning, Israeli officials said that more than 99% of those threats had been shot down with the help of American, British, and French forces. An independent analyst later backed that general picture of an almost clean intercept night. The sky above the country lit up with streaks from defensive missiles that never let most of the attackers reach their targets. Each defensive missile fired that night cost tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes more for the longest range shots that can reach high into the atmosphere. Many of the incoming drones and rockets were cheap by comparison, built from commercial parts or assembled in low-cost workshops, run by groups in Lebanon, Syria, or Yemen. How long can any government afford to swap a low-cost projectile for a missile priced like a luxury car every time a siren sounds? Inside the research corridors of Israeli defense firms, the question was blunt. There had to be a way to keep the intercept rate high without setting fire to the national budget every time a neighbor emptied its stockpile. For crews on the ground, the math is as real as the radar screen. Every time a launch command goes out, someone approves spending tens of thousands of dollars to destroy a threat that may have cost a fraction of that to build. Multiply that decision by hundreds of shots across several fronts, and the bill can climb into the hundreds of millions in a matter of nights. That is why planners started talking about a different kind of answer, one that uses electricity instead of explosives. What if a defender could burn through a rocket's skin with a few dollars worth of power and keep firing as long as the generator stayed on? That challenge pushed a project called Iron Beam from slides and small trials into the center of Israel's air defense plans. Iron Beam is a high-power laser system designed to sit underneath the missile shield that the world already knows. At the top, there is the Arrow family for long-range ballistic threats. In the middle, there is David's Sling. Closer in is Iron Dome for rockets and mortars. Iron Beam is the new bottom layer, and instead of firing a physical interceptor, it concentrates a tight beam of energy on incoming rockets, artillery shells, and drones until their structure fails in flight. How do you turn a line of light into something that can compete with a missile? Lasers in defense labs are not new. Yet for years, most of them lived on test ranges or on a few ships, firing at small targets under near-perfect conditions. Israeli engineers spent the last decade trying to push this design into everyday use, shrinking the hardware, increasing the power, and splicing it into fire control software that already tracks hundreds of objects at once. Officials and company statements say a single shot from Iron Beam uses only a few dollars worth of electricity, while one Iron Dome Tamir interceptor can cost tens of thousands of dollars. That means the beam can be thousands of times cheaper per engagement than the missile it is meant to replace in the lower layer. For any country that spends heavily on defense, this is the kind of system that changes how accountants and generals talk to each other. In simple terms, a laser battery that stays powered can keep firing as long as its generators and cooling units keep running. There is no metal missile to reload and no booster to crane into a launch canister after every interception. The laser locks onto a target and holds a hotspot of energy on one point of the outer skin. Within a few seconds, that point heats to the level where metal or composite material starts to weaken or melt. A warhead can cook off, a fuel tank can rupture, or a control fin can fail. From the ground, the strike is almost invisible. On the enemy side, it looks like a sudden breakup in midair with no warning trail from an interceptor. Armed groups in places like Gaza, Lebanon, and Yemen buy or assemble cheap drones and short-range rockets in large numbers, and they care far less about cost per shot than a state defender does. A system that can fire again and again for the price of keeping a building's lights on flips that economic script. There are limits because fog, heavy cloud, and dust can scatter a beam, and very fast or heavy hardened missiles still need classic interceptors. Even with those limits, a mature laser layer is the kind of weapon that could change warfare for anyone who depends on missiles and drones. It attacks the attacker's wallet as much as the attacker's rockets. For years, Iron Beam appeared mainly in short clips from defense expos and quiet test days in the desert. Operators show turrets tracking small targets over sand or sea, then cut the footage before anyone could see how often they missed. That began to change as the system moved from pure experiment towards something closer to a standard battery. Officials and company executives started to hint at real engagement in the north, where laser units helped bring down drones launched from Lebanon. If the goal is a shield that can fire almost as often as it can see, when do you stop calling it a trial and start calling it a weapon? In recent years, Israeli statements have described Iron Beam as entering its final testing phases, with batteries deployed to southern and northern ranges to shoot at rockets, mortars, and unmanned aircraft in different weather and light conditions. Defense sources talk about linking those batteries into the same command network that already guides Iron Dome interceptions, so that a radar tracking hundreds of objects can hand off the cheapest and slowest ones to the laser. The aim is simple. Missiles and fighter jets should deal with the hardest problems, while Iron Beam cleans up the cheap threats that once forced expensive shots. When those batteries sit in the field, the next large wave of threats should meet a different mix of defenses from the April 2024 attack. Long-range ballistic missiles still climb to the top of the queue and meet Arrow high above the region. Medium-range threats and complex cruise missiles still trigger some of the most expensive interceptors and fight patrols. Many of the cheaper rockets and drones near the bottom of the envelope, however, can be handed to a laser that spends a few dollars worth of power for each kill. Classic Iron Dome batteries can save their interceptors for whatever punches through the beam. For a commander under pressure, this is more than a neat gadget. It is a way to keep the shield up for longer without telling the finance ministry that the bill has just doubled again. For officers from other states, the sight of a working laser battery sitting beside familiar launchers sends a different message. It says that the country which once surprised the region with Iron Dome is now close to fielding a weapon that many others still talk about, mainly in future tense. This is the kind of system that keeps rival planners guessing, because they have to assume that every new clash will teach the laser crews how to work faster and shoot cheaper. Iron Beam sits at the bottom of the shield, but the weapon that alarms many generals most sits at the very top. The Arrow 3 interceptor was built to meet ballistic missiles not in the upper atmosphere, but in space above it. In tests over the Pacific Ocean and later in live operations, it has shown that it can hit a target outside the atmosphere and break it apart before it falls back toward Earth. How did a small state end up fielding an interceptor that kills enemy warheads in space and now protects cities far beyond its own borders? The Arrow program started in the 1980s as a joint effort with the United States, yet Arrow 3 is the generation that turned the concept into something that worries any planner who relies on long-range missiles. It uses hit-to-kill technology, which means the interceptor destroys its target with direct impact, rather than a large explosive warhead. Public sources describe a reach of roughly 2,400 kilometers and a kill zone high above the atmosphere, where incoming warheads can be struck before they split or release decoys. For any attacker who believed that distance and altitude guaranteed safety, this is a rude surprise. During the April 2024 attack, crews from the Arrow family of systems took part in knocking down ballistic missiles high above the region before they could dive towards cities and airbases. For many defense officials in Europe, that night was the moment when this technology moved from theory to proof. They saw that a system designed in a small country could reach into space and remove high-value missiles aimed at real people. Not long after that, Germany moved from interest to contract, signing a deal worth around €4 billion to buy Arrow 3 batteries for its own air defense network. By late 2025, the first battery had arrived on German soil, the start of a plan to cover much of Central Europe with a layer that can hit incoming missiles before they cross any national border. For Berlin, the system is more than Israeli hardware with foreign labels. It is a way to plug into a shield that has already been tested in live combat and tuned under constant pressure. Other European countries have signaled interest in joining the same project. in part because building a similar capability from scratch would take many years and demand larger budgets. For generals who plan around missiles and drones, this is the kind of system that keeps them awake at night. It changes the odds for anyone who thought that long-range missiles guaranteed leverage in a crisis. What happens to a strategy built on fear when a partner can quietly remove whole salvos in space? This is where the impact of the two systems comes together. At the bottom of the spectrum, Iron Beam promises to make cheap drones and rockets far less effective by stripping away their main advantage: cost. At the top, Arrow 3 reaches into space to remove high-value warheads before they can split or maneuver. Together, they stretch the shield from low-flying quadcopters to ballistic missiles that arc over continents. A state that can offer that full range of protection is not just selling equipment, it is selling a kind of dependency. Inside defense ministries, the pattern is clear. Weapons that work under real fire are easier to sell than systems that only exist in glossy brochures. Every clash around Gaza, Lebanon, or further away now doubles as a live test and a quiet sales pitch. Each time a rocket launches or a drone crosses a border, radars record its speed, shape, and path. Computers log how decoys behave and which engagement rules work best. Command centers track how human crews react when several threats arrive at once. And engineers feed that information back into software updates and small changes in hardware. How many other countries can say that their most advanced systems have thousands of real shots on record? For foreign buyers, that history often matters more than a specification sheet. A general in Europe or Asia can point to a night like April 2024 and know that the same class of interceptor has already been used to protect real cities from real missiles, not only dummy targets over an empty ocean. A planner watching an Iron Beam trial can see how many drones and rockets it handles in a single engagement sequence and compare that directly with a stack of classic interceptors. What do you buy if you expect the next 10 years to be full of cheap drones and unpredictable missile launches? The safe choice starts to look like the shield that has already been running in combat, rather than the one that lives in a brochure. For Israel's defense ministry, that loop of attack, interception, and upgrade is a source of quiet power. It turns war zones into reference sites. Each new clash generates more data that can be fed into algorithms, more footage that can be shown in closed rooms, and more confidence that the systems will work again. For the people who live under the sirens, that reality is brutal, because their towns become the place where theories are tested. For the engineers and executives who build the shield, it creates something close to a rolling demonstration where clients keep coming to watch. This is the kind of shield that turns real wars into demonstrations and shop windows at the same time. All of this technology sits on top of a quieter foundation. To keep Iron Beam firing and Arrow linked to distant radars and command centers, Israel and its partners are upgrading power grids, data links, and shared command networks behind the scenes. New fiber corridors and undersea cables into and out of the country give its defense systems multiple routes to reach Allied headquarters in Europe and the United States. Shared warning networks mean that data from one radar can cue an interceptor hundreds of kilometers away. When a missile lifts off in one region, computers in several other countries may see it within seconds. Critics inside and outside Israel warn about the trade-offs that come with this network. Environmental groups question some of the corridors used for energy and data projects and the risks of spills or damage along sensitive routes. Some European politicians argue that tying their missile defense to a single small partner creates dependence that is hard to unwind. Others worry that thick layers of shields can tempt leaders to take risks that would once have looked too dangerous because they feel protected by lasers and exo-atmospheric interceptors. The systems that promise to stop the worst night sky can also change how quickly a government reaches for force. When you pull back, the deeper pattern is hard to ignore. Israel is not only building weapons that can burn through drones and hit missiles in space, it is building a shield that other countries begin to rely on and a connected nervous system that lets that shield stretch across borders. For any government that depends on missiles and drones, these systems are a dream and a warning at the same time. They promise protection from the worst night sky you can imagine, and they remind every rival that some of the most advanced defenses in the world now live in a very small strip of land. In the quiet between sirens, that is the real shock. The country that spent decades learning how to survive under fire is now wiring its solutions into other people's wars and collecting a fee every time someone else reaches for its shield.